All right, I think we're good. Let's get to our speaker for tonight, Kirk Launius. Let me move some of my stuff. Kirk Launius ran against Lupe Valdez for sheriff, and he's a former military man and a police officer, and he knows the importance of a sheriff. And he went to Sheriff Mack's seminar over the weekend. Sheriff Mack is from Arizona, and a lot of you don't know who Sheriff Mack is, but you look him up. He's awesome, and he'll give you a story about what he heard about over there. I'll give the floor to him. Do you have enough room here?
Oh, I think so.
All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you, Regina. I don't know if this is going to be, this will actually be more painful for you to listen to than it will be for me to deliver. So this is what happens when you go out to the desert in Las Vegas and then you come back to Texas, and I usually don't have many allergies, but I hear that what is it, mountain cedar?
Cedar, they say cedar.
Yeah, so that must have gotten me. So I still feel pretty good today, but I think as the temperatures drop, my voice has trailed off. These may be the last words I utter all week, but I can't think of a better group to share them with. And I've just been praying today that God would bless me with the right words to say. There's just too much to cover, and I'm going to kind of keep this short.
Well, as long as it's 9 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
So you got a good 30 minutes.
Okay, and I may not even go that long, and I'll be happy to come back, and I'll give my contact info so any of you can contact me. My goal tonight is to raise some issues and some concerns about not only things going on in Dallas County and in Texas, but across the country. And the way that the county sheriff is the county sheriffs are stepping forward to push back against tyrannical forces in our country. And first of all, I want to thank Regina for putting this group together. I did participate in the protest about Syria down there a few months back, and I was really compelled. As you mentioned, I'm a military veteran. I'm a Navy veteran, and I have to think long and hard about my fellow brothers and sisters, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and how they may be used, what situations they be put in. How many of you are veterans in the room? Do we have any? No. Brad here.
I'm a veteran of R&B.
Okay. Thank you for your service. As Regina mentioned, I'm a former Dallas police officer. I used to work in Southeast Patrol, and I can speak to many of the issues that Bishop Lawson was describing. I'm now a businessman. I have a private security consulting firm, and I teach entrepreneurship to young people, especially inner city youth. I have one young man. He graduated from the Dallas Can Academy. He wants to start a trucking company. That's just his goal. Someone in his family drove trucks, and he wants not only just to be a driver, but own a company one day. And I thought, well, this guy's worth helping and teaching entrepreneurship. So, in fact, I'm going to talk to you, Bishop Lawson, a little bit more about that program. So, I like to be among people, who really, put their money where their mouth is, and not people just of words, but of action. And there was every reason. Just as last week, I gave up 2 days of my very busy business schedule to go to Las Vegas, which sounds like a lot of fun, but I promise you, the first thing I did when I got off the plane, and I had 2 colleagues with me, one who, a friend from high school who was very active in my campaign for sheriff, Colin McKinney. And yes, Collin County and McKinney, Texas bear the names of his I think it was his great-great-great-grandfather, who was the eldest signatory to the Texas Declaration of Independence. And then Dallas police officer Tom Haney, who's a 31-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department. So Dallas was represented, even if our sheriff, whose name you mentioned earlier, was not. And in fact, she's been invited to all of the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officer Association events. There's been 4 major conventions or conferences, and I think someone in this room actually delivered that personal invitation to her on each occasion, and she's never found it worth her time to attend. And the sheriffs at that event know who she is, but they know who she is for other reasons, and not really the reasons that we need to push back against tyranny. She's not known for that. But I want to tell you at the end of my presentation about a female sheriff in Texas who you could be really proud of. And she's a military veteran. She's the sheriff in a small county south of here, and I'll tell you a little bit about her later. Awesome gal. And she's leading quite a movement right here in Texas that you need to know about. So I'm going to try to highlight some of the key people that I spent time with this past week. Before I do that, I just want to start with kind of set the stage for the way I've been thinking the last few days. This comes from the 10th chapter of Isaiah. It says, "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the needy from justice, and to rob the poor of my people of their right." Does that sound like the times we're living in? This chapter goes on to talk about the judgment on arrogant Assyria. And down in verse 33, it says, "Behold, the Lord God of hosts will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The great in height will be hewn down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe." So that's a warning, not from me, but from the creator of the universe to those who hold power arrogantly. And they've done so throughout the ages. Some of those are in elected office. Well, I say elected. Maybe they were elected, maybe they weren't.
Most likely not.
We had a speaker last week, several speakers talked about election fraud, and actually told us ways that we are being defrauded in this very county. And I've talked to numerous people who have been around it very closely, and they tell you exactly the mechanisms. And nobody seems to care. You can write the Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General, and sometimes politicians, when they're in an election fight, they don't want to hear anything. They want to just take a pass on things. Well, we need to take a pass on voting for such people. Arrogant politicians who block the investigations of the deaths, the murders of our brave servicemen and women. And not just in Benghazi, but Google or go to Bing.com and look up Extortion 17. And I'm privileged to know people and have worked and served with members of the Special Forces community. This goes back even before my service in the military. In college, I read a book by Colonel Charlie Beckwith. It was on the history of Delta Force. And he was known as Chargin' Charlie. And he was drafted by the Green Bay Packers. He could have had an NFL career, and he passed all of that up and sacrificed all of that and went into the military. And an amazing man. And I read that book when I was at the University of Texas at Austin. And at the end of the book, it said, Colonel Beckwith is now retired in Austin, Texas. He runs a private security firm. And I said, I have to find this man. And this is before the internet, so I went through the phone book, looked up every Beckwith, called every Beckwith in the phone book, and finally got a lady. She said, "That's my uncle." Wow. I said, would you ask him to call me? And I got a phone call from Colonel Beckwith, and he said, "Come on over." And we talked for hours. I was writing a report for a speech class, and I visited with him several times, and very gracious. His company trained drug-sniffing dogs to go into high schools to sniff out drugs. So here's this incredible warrior who literally took a gut shot that should have taken him out and survived that. He was famous for when they brought him into the hospital, the field hospital. He said, I didn't come in here to die, basically. And you just told him, you can speak your intentions, and the forces show up sometimes. And I think that's what we do through many groups like this. And I'm privileged to speak to a lot of different groups. And there's people around town. Who knows when someone might watch the presentations from this group? It could be weeks or months or years later, even after some of us are gone. But if you're speaking truth, and that's what I like about this group, it's not partisan, it's not about party politics, just getting to the truth and giving a chance. There's so many people that want to suppress debate. What are they afraid of? I frankly don't care what they're afraid of. I just know what the founders of our blessed nation established. And so, as part of our conference, we had some really great presentations by some awesome people, some of whom are going to be passing through the Dallas-Fort Worth area in coming weeks, so I'll make an effort to tell you about them. And earlier today, not knowing if my voice was going to cooperate, I went ahead and made some little graphics so you wouldn't have to put them in electronically on the video. So I'll, when I mention a website, I'd like for you to write it down. And if any of you need some paper, I don't have extra pens, I'm going to pass this around. This is actually the CSPOA, which is Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officer Association.
Can I hold this up for you so they can see it, or?
Well, at the appropriate time, yeah, if you don't mind, if
Okay.
you want to maybe just take a seat and.
I'll
so you-
just stand over here.
Okay, that'd be great. And so I'm going to pass this around. This is actually the Bill of Rights on this. So pass this around, and if you will, and make some notes on the Bill of Rights there so you can write down some of these great websites. And then those people watching can go to Bing or Google or whatever your favorite search engine is and look them up. So this is the program from the CSPOA conference. Again, this was the 4th event. There was one in Las Vegas about 2 years ago. There was another one in Las Vegas in September of 2012, which I attended. And we had a really great one in St. Charles, Missouri last year. And that was, that's shown in these DVDs. You can order these at cspoa.org, and I hope you will. All the money goes to support the organization. And I hope after I tell you a little bit more about what the CSPOA does and why the Office of the Sheriff is so important, that you'll join the CSPOA, and I do have some membership forms. You can join as a civilian, and let me start these around too. Go ahead and just, everybody take one. I think I have enough. Even if you don't join tonight or this week, maybe you can make copies of those and pass them on.
I already joined.
Did you? Fantastic.
I gave them the credit card and say take.
Oh, that's great, and that's what we need to have happen.
What's it stand for, CSPOA?
Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officer Association. And the founder of that organization, I'm sorry, these aren't in the right order, but I'll find the one for you. Let me just go ahead and start with Sheriff Richard Mack. Actually, I think I'll just hold it up because
Okay.
the camera view, I think you've got it where, and I don't mind, I can just hold it up. Sheriff Richard Mack is a retired sheriff from Arizona. And he was one of the sheriffs that was named in the Supreme Court case back in the 90s. It was a 10th Amendment case. And this little booklet, when you're carrying your pocket constitutions, I recommend you get one of these tonight. These are available tonight for $1. That's what I paid for them at CSPOA. This is a little summary booklet that Sheriff Richard Mack put together. It's The Victory for State Sovereignty, the Mack-Prince decision. Basically, that was a landmark case in which the federal ATF had come into Arizona and decreed to the sheriffs, this is back under the Brady Bill in the 90s, that those sheriffs were going to have to do all kinds of background checks and things that didn't have any kind of federal funding associated with them, but including mental health checks. And Sheriff Mack pushed back against that. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they won the case. It was a 5-4 decision. And Justice Scalia wrote that majority opinion. It's outlined in this booklet. I'm not going to attempt to explain everything, but I'm going to pick from just a few portions of that. This was stated by the district federal judge in Arizona, Judge John Roll. Quote, Mack is thus forced to choose between keeping his oath or obeying the act, subjecting himself to possible sanctions, end quote. Now, Judge Roll, by the way, was murdered in a Safeway parking lot about a block from my sister-in-law's house where my niece and nephew live, a Safeway grocery store that I've frequented whenever I visited Tucson. That was the same day Gabby Giffords was shot. You may recall that. And he was instrumental in this case. And you notice that Judge Roll said that Sheriff Mack had a choice to make between keeping his oath or obeying, did he say the law? Remember, this is a federal judge. You said the act. Okay.
It's not supposed to be that.
Well, okay, I'm going to explain that. Let's go to our Constitution, because there's so much nonsense out there, all these politicians that, I heard a guy the other day claim to be a Second Amendment supporter, and someone was talking about ear protection, and he was just baffled. He didn't know what anybody was talking about. Ear protection. You know, yeah, protecting your hearing when you're shooting. The guy's a great Second Amendment supporter, right? Big gun enthusiast, doesn't even know what ear protection is. What an idiot. And these are the people that are wanting our votes. But in Article 6 of the Constitution, it says, second paragraph, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof. In pursuance thereof. Pursuance of what? The Constitution. So if something is not made in pursuance of Constitution, is it law?
No.
It's not law. That's what Judge Roll was saying here. Okay? It's an unlawful act. And those of you who've been in the military know what service members are required to do in the face of an unlawful order. Okay, we all know about Nuremberg, and there's no excuse there. So, another term that Michael Perutka, who was one of our presenters, Michael Anthony Perutka, founder of the Institute on the Constitution, co-founder, and the website is theamericanview.com. He calls it pretended legislation. So, just to get over this hump, I want everyone to repeat after me. Pretended legislation.
Pretended legislation.
Say it again louder. Pretended legislation. Okay. That's really hard for a lot of people to fathom. People say, how can you stand up there and talk about such things? You know, our duly elected officials, they pass these, fill in the blank. Is it a law? When is it a law? When it's in pursuance of what? The Constitution. And if it's not, it's an unlawful act or pretended legislation. All right, okay. So, we had a great presentation from Michael Perutka on that. So again, you can get a copy of this booklet. It's very short. It's designed to fit right in there with your pocket Constitution. And this is even being used in South Carolina to push back against Obamacare. Because one of the key statements in this decision, and this is law, this is the most significant 10th Amendment. It wasn't a Second Amendment case. It's a 10th Amendment case. Because, as Justice Scalia said, the Constitution protects us from our own best interests. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government, precisely so we may resist the temptation to concentrate power in one location as an expedient solution to the crisis of the day. This was written many years ago, and it sounds like everything we're facing today. Yes, sir?
Again, what is that booklet and where do we get it?
You can get it at CSPOA.org,
Okay.
or you can get it at sheriffmac.com.
And what is the title?
It is The Victory for State Sovereignty,
Okay.
the Mac Prince versus USA, the monumental Supreme Court case that restored the 10th Amendment.
Thank you.
This is all about restoring things. This isn't a revolution. Okay, the jokers that want to pin, you know how they treated Pastor Broden? Remember when he ran for Congress? Revolutionary, for reading from the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Okay, those are people who were unfortunately educated. We were talking earlier about the educational environment in America, and we're not trained in the Constitution, have never learned the Constitution properly. We had 3 constitutional lawyers at this event, and they all said, and they went to the best law schools in the country, and said they don't teach the Constitution in law schools. They teach case law. There's a huge difference. Police academies don't teach the Constitution. I volunteered for a committee while I was in Las Vegas. I guess I don't have enough things to do these days, but I'll find the time. It's a committee to draft a standardized curriculum for law enforcement academies to teach the Constitution.
That's a great idea.
And as I mentioned, I'm a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin. I have a degree in economics, and I'm a graduate of the Dallas Police Academy. And I'm proud of those things, but I do know, too, that I've learned a lot more outside the walls of the classrooms than inside. And I have many friends who've never been to college who are far wiser people than myself. And I think we need to recognize that wisdom and always seek the truth and not take this cheap substitute. I heard recently about some politicians that their sons or daughters couldn't get into UT Law School, so they were some kind of shenanigans going on behind the scenes. And, power, what is it about absolute power corrupts?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Now, everything that, all the delegated powers are outlined. Article 1, Section 8 talks about, it's in our Constitution. Basically, they fall into 4 categories: war, peace, foreign trade, and external relations. It's always outward-looking things. The Constitution was designed to limit the federal government, protect our rights. One thing you'll notice, it says in Article 1, Section 8, goes through the list and then gets to this part: to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. Wow, that's in the Constitution. Ooh, militia with a capital M. That's going to scare a lot of people, isn't it? And for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Okay. When I started reading the Constitution, I actually started learning the truth about our form of government and the dual spheres of sovereignty that Justice Scalia talks about. Because as the 10th Amendment says, those powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to whom? To the states and to the people. So if we didn't delegate those, then they're not powers of the federal government. Okay. And that's why so many of our problems today can and should be solved at the state level. Of course, the Second Amendment, a well-regulated, what? There's that word again. Being necessary to the security of a free state. Michael Peroutka talks about only one time is anything mentioned in the Constitution as being necessary. That's the only time. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But so many Americans are just blissfully ignorant of our Constitution and our founding documents and our history. And Thomas Jefferson said in an 1816 letter to Colonel Yancey that to be ignorant and free is to wish for what never was and what never will be. So we have to teach our young people and ourselves by setting that example. And to that end, Mr. Peroutka, through his Institute on the Constitution, has provided me with a course. It's called The American View of the Constitution. And some of you may have participated in other training courses regarding the Constitution. By the way, you can get that at theamericanview.com. Heritage Foundation and what's the college that has Mark Levin always talks about? Hillsdale has an excellent training program for that. This is one of several, but I want to. Yeah, there's no excuse these days. With the ubiquitous nature of the internet, everyone should have access to these training courses. Oh, it's right here. That's why I clipped them together. So, the American View of the Constitution there is a God, the God of the Bible. Our rights come from Him. The purpose of civil government is to secure our God-given rights. That's the basic foundation of this course. And again, if you go to theamericanview.com, and I encourage you to, you can access those materials. And they've created a special program for law enforcement where a sheriff, excuse me, and I wish our chief of police would do this, but sheriffs will be able to set this up where their officers can log in and study this over time. And it's really, even though we were in the police academy for 38 weeks, we just kind of blew through the Constitution, I think, in a day. And no one's ever there to really tell you what the basis for these things are. I saw an interesting video a while back where this was after one of the incidents where, some crazed person shot up some gun-free zone. I don't go to gun-free zones. So they had a town hall where Anderson Cooper, I think it was, had this town hall. And if it's got a big production value and a big audience and lots of lights, then it's got to be the truth, right? Anything that would happen in a small back room of a restaurant couldn't be more truthful, could it? And Sheriff Brad Rogers from Elkhart, Indiana was there. He's one of our CSPOA members. And he dealt with Amish farmers who were having SWAT team raids, to come in and seize their fresh milk and all this crazy stuff. And so he was at this event, and he was speaking many of these constitutional truths. And one of these people who's gotten an expensive degree but never really learned the Constitution, Jeffrey Toobin, who's ABC News expert, legal expert. And notice they don't say constitutional expert because nobody would qualify in that organization, but he was trying to school Sheriff Rogers on the Supremacy Clause. And in his stupidity, basically said that anything that the federal government issues or utters is trumps state law. And that's just a complete bastardization of the Supremacy Clause.
It does on TV.
Remember the in pursuance part. And there's many unconstitutional acts or pretended legislation that are not made in pursuance of the Constitution. And it's the sheriff's role, quite simply, to interpose and stop that.
Right.
And our legislatures to nullify those unconstitutional laws. Which doesn't mean that I'm a lawless sort. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, both in my military career, excuse me, I told you it's going to be painful, and as a peace officer. So, no, not at all. I'm not advocating anarchy or living in a lawless society. I'm simply standing up for the oath that I took to support and defend this, our Constitution, and true laws, those made in pursuance of the Constitution. But I suspect the Dallas Morning News and other such publications will come after me, as they did Pastor Broden and others, to try to belittle these foundational views and push. Someone mentioned the Communist Manifesto earlier, and the planks that have been since the 40s, 50s, have been checking things off the list. Control of our school system. And the educational system is a big part of it. Yes, sir.
I have a question. I have read about and heard about for some years now that in the military they've been passing a little circular around, a questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions of which was essentially, if ordered to, would you fire upon the American public?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that about 72% say basically, hell no. But the other 28% get preferential jobs with local police departments.
Yeah.
Are you addressing this?
Well, I don't know about the part about getting jobs with police departments. I mean, obviously, police departments are recruiting through many different sources around the country. They spend so much money to go to other cities to recruit, there's just not enough qualified applicants. So, I'll look at, if you have some information that you'd like to share with me later on that, I'd love to look into that. There's just so many people that are that are not willing to question, and military members or police officers or sheriff's deputies who would say, well, that's just not in my job description. I just go do my job every day. I do what I'm told. And, you know, that's not what, when you take that oath, it means that you, and there's no expiration date to that oath, that you will support and defend fully the Constitution of the United States. You're not taking that oath to any particular individual, but to the Constitution. So, you know, to the extent that there's a wrong understanding, that has to be corrected through education. And it can be.
It is my understanding the Constitution of the United States, not too far, is the corporate Constitution, and our Constitution is a little bit different than others.
Yeah,
You're
and
aware of that?
yeah, and without getting into too much detail on that, I just encourage you. We mentioned several other sources for constitutional education. I have a complete catalog of that. So Michael Perutka was one of our presenters, and then we had a update on Sheriff Jeff Christopher. Sheriff Christopher is the sheriff of Sussex County, Delaware, and Joe Biden's son, Beau Biden, who's the Attorney General of Delaware, has been involved in this scheme with the legislators, some of the legislators there, to basically declare the sheriff has no arrest powers. Okay, and that's tied up in a court battle. But I would encourage you to read about Sheriff Jeff Christopher and donate towards that cause. We've donated, raised and donated a significant amount of money through CSPOA. I've gotten to know Sheriff Christopher very well, and you know, at the level of his county commissioners, there's only 3 counties in Delaware. They've removed, you know, all the vehicles and taken away funding to where he can't basically do his job as a conservator of the peace, even though their state constitution describes him as the conservator of the peace. So common sense would tell you, if you're going to conserve the peace, you have to have the ability to arrest lawbreakers, right? But somehow the people in Delaware have let that slip. In Connecticut in 2000.
There are no lawbreakers, don't you know that?
Well,
They don't exist.
what is a criminal? A criminal could be a person with a gun. You know, if you're, God forbid, on the way out here to your car tonight, you know, stops you on your way to your car and puts a gun to you and takes your money. But then you might actually reach your car and find a paycheck in there, and the money's already been stolen. You know, you may have an unlawful act that has some sort of financial penalty attached to it, and there's not a big difference. I mean, there's still
Like a travel ticket?
criminal act. Yeah, I mean, you might have, you know, taxation through citation that's being used in some areas that's, abused. Okay, so Sheriff Jeff Christopher, I'd highly recommend you read this story. This is an ongoing battle, and he needs our support. The legal fees are mounting, and, you know, one way to destroy someone is to do so financially. Connecticut already lost their sheriffs, the office of the sheriff, back in 2000. And it wasn't under a Democratic governor, it was under a Republican governor, who later was convicted of federal crimes, some kind of financial crimes, and you can Google that. Google Connecticut sheriffs abolished year 2000.
So they dissolved the office of sheriff.
Yeah. Remember when the Newtown shooting happened, that tragic incident up in Connecticut, the school shooting? There wasn't a sheriff standing before the microphone, it was state police. Sheriff Mack wrote a book, and again, you can get this at Richard Mack or sheriffmack.com, wrote a book called The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. And that's really true, because the sheriff is the very last one to stand in the gap there and interpose.
Could it be that the people could then, where they dissolved the sheriff, or they could actually have an election? Or maybe...
Could it be restored? Is that what you're
Could it
asking?
be restored?
Well, sure.
Yeah, we want a sheriff.
Yeah, the states could take that action, but people have to be educated first to the importance of. The state of Alaska does not have sheriffs. I don't believe they were ever set up. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with what happened on JFK celebration with the Sheriff's Department and the Alex Jones protesters?
Not specifically. Do you want to just tell us real briefly what?
Well, most people know, I was down there, the protesters wanted to say something about the official story, official celebration.
Oh, yeah, about being able to be on the.
Right, and the Dallas police let them in beyond one barricade.
Mhm.
They didn't get into the inner sanctum.
Yeah.
Everybody was gonna be let in an hour or so. And while they were waiting there, the sheriff's department provoked them. They started pushing them. They didn't even give them a warning. They didn't say, you have to clear out of here. They just started pushing physically right away, trying to provoke them, and kept them pushing.
Did anyone here witness that? Were you?
It's
It was all video.
Is it on video? Okay.
Yeah, Dallas Jones is a journalist.
Yeah, well, I can assure you as Dallas County Sheriff that wouldn't happen. The First Amendment, so many Americans shockingly don't know the 5 basic rights that are covered in the First Amendment. So let's talk about those right now. They are freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and a lot of people get bogged down, they can't remember others. But press, which because of the internet, we can take news and information directly to people. There's this arrogant discussion in some people in our U.S. Senate and Congress trying to, say that bloggers aren't, if you start defining things, you can control it. Yeah, press, and then the right to redress your grievance, which we've seen that trampled on, for example, in the Dallas County Commissioners Court. Yes, sir.
That was a unit of sheriff's deputies under Homeland Security control. I'd like to-
Okay, well, and I thought that's where you may be going. And I have a real issue with that. That was discussed at our conference. We've seen the Federal Protective Service vehicles over the years that, when I was a Dallas police officer, you go to federal court and you see the cars at Federal Protective Service. Well, last year or two, they've added this big decal with block letters that says police. Okay? And if you go to the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, it defines who are peace officers. Okay, so I encourage you to Google or go to Bing.com or whatever and look it up. Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, who are peace officers. Just read those definitions yourself and see if these Homeland Security agents, they drive around in Tahoes, say police on them. I've seen them very recently breaking traffic laws, speeding, just arrogant.
Are they black cars?
They're
Yeah.
white with blue decals.
Okay, big deal.
Yes, sir.
They've translated that into Arabic, and that's what Al Qaeda uses as their blueprint.
No, seriously, the police, and look at a picture of the police car, it's black, Al Qaeda, and it says police next to it.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So, I don't know. Somebody suggested this is an effort to desensitize the public to a federal police force. And part of removing the office of the sheriff nationwide, you have about 3,000, just under 3,100 sheriffs in the country, counties that have a sheriff.
Where did the Texas Rangers come?
Texas Rangers are investigative branch, under the Texas Department of Public Safety, basically part of our executive branch through the governor. And we need to elect governors who stand on the right side of these things too. Yes, sir?
What is that website again, who are the police?
You'll have to search it, Texas Code of Criminal Procedure.
Oh.
Yeah, who are police. Now, federal agents can be given the authority to enforce state law, but that's a delegated authority. It's not just an absolute right. It can be taken away too. If you have a governor who wants to help stand in the gap, the sheriff, as made clear in the Mac Prince decision, these aren't my words, this is the law of the land, is the chief law enforcement officer in the county. The acronym that's actually used in that Supreme Court case is CLEO or CLEO, that stands for Chief Law Enforcement Officer. And there's other officials in the county, you'll hear a county judge or a DA say, I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the county, okay. But when it comes down to enforcing the law, the CLEO, as it's stated here, that's the county sheriff. Okay, so another case that, in addition to Sheriff Christopher's, that's still ongoing, and this really is amazing to me because back in June of 2013, this particular individual had no idea what the CSPOA was, had never heard of it. It's a sheriff in Florida, his name is Nick Finch, and I love it, he's in Liberty County, Florida. So search him on the internet and read everything you can about this case. This is huge. And again, another case of a Republican governor making a huge mistake. And basically, this sheriff interposed on behalf of one of the citizens of his county. He was it's kind of a semi-rural county, and this guy was just driving along in his truck on a rural road, and it's kind of a bumpy road, and he said the sheriff's driven that road himself. It's kind of hard to hold the lane anyway. And one of his deputies pulled the guy over and noticed the guy had a firearm of some sort in the vehicle, and I don't know if it was a long rifle. I'm assuming it was. I mean, it was lawfully carrying that weapon. And by the way, how many of you are part of the open carry movement? I know you mentioned bring your AR. Yeah, that's really gaining ground in communities all over Texas. Just again, this isn't a revolution. It's reintroducing, refamiliarizing, reclaiming what we've always had. It's never changed. The right to keep and bear arms. And I talked to a candidate for Texas Senate yesterday. He's in favor of open carry, constitutional carry. And I agree. I think the Second Amendment's very clear. I mean, it's extremely clear. I don't believe in all this concealed handgun licensing nonsense and registries and all that. But anyway, and it really chaps me that when I go to Arizona to visit family, they can carry openly out there. I walk into a supermarket and, it's not a gun-free zone. But here in Texas, there's a lot of education to be done. And part of that can be done when people see law-abiding citizens walking down the street with a long rifle slung over their shoulder. It's a beautiful sight. Or on an overpass. And I say, go for it. We paid for those overpasses, right? We paid for those DHS vehicles and those up-armored whatevers 16-ton trucks they really need. Give me a
Go to
break.
the Chevrolet dealership there at Arapahoe and 75, just go in the back. We've got brand new vehicles, probably 50 to 60 every single week coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Please pack it.
Well, the CSPOA got involved in the legal defense for this. In this case, Sheriff Finch refused to charge this individual. The deputy asked the man, "Do you have any other weapons?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got a gun in my pocket." And the deputy arrested him for carrying a handgun without a permit. Now, the Dallas Police Academy was good enough. They taught us enough about the Constitution, know about, bad arrests and good arrests. And this deputy really took it to the limit there. And the sheriff was notified. He was at dinner. He went down to the jail and cut the guy loose. Said, "I believe in the Second Amendment. He's not going to be charged. Cut him loose." Someone had written the man's name on a log, and they alleged that had been whited out. It really wouldn't have mattered because the sheriff had the discretion to charge the guy or not. Yes, ma'am.
I just had some advice for gun owners. If you're going to a protest, be sure to find out whether or not it's going to be arrestable action, because if people are planning to commit civil disobedience, the police will arrest whoever they want. And even if you're carrying and dotting every I, crossing every T regarding the law, they can bust you anyway. And so if anybody's planning to commit civil disobedience, you should leave your gun at home. And if you're going to carry, be sure that it's a non-arrestable action, that nobody's going to commit CD of any kind. I'm just giving that out as some advice.
Well, thank you for that. Now, this sheriff was, the word got around that this particular deputy was going to be put under investigation. And so the deputy went to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and told his version of the story, which was apparently had some interesting additions to it. And FDLS, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or FDLE, came out and arrested Sheriff Finch, put him in his own jail. And the governor, a Republican, Rick Scott, suspended the sheriff. And people of Liberty County weren't too happy about that. And the surrounding counties weren't too happy about that. So anyway, they appointed an interim sheriff, and for 5, 6, or 7 months it went on, but there was a court case, a trial, and they tried to charge him with a official misconduct and destruction of government record and that kind of stuff. And there was audible laughter in the courtroom. This judge had to continually ask the people to stop laughing because it was just such a farce. He was acquitted on all the charges and was awarded for his courageous stand on behalf of our Constitution. Sheriff Nick Finch was awarded our CSPOA Sheriff of the Year award. And I got to meet him and his wife. And the plaque, the deputy resigned. He knew,
good.
yeah, as did several of the senior supervisor captains.
Yeah, there you go.
You got his back pay too, I believe.
But they went back out, get this, the state attorney, which would be like our AG, went back out and they rearrested the man who had been stopped on the traffic stop. So now I'm hearing that there's a citizen grand jury process in Florida to bring charges against the state attorney and the assistant state attorney and the governor. And, you know, I've read some critiques of this. They say that Governor Scott was just trying to posture so that, you know, try to get Democrat votes the next time around, show that he wasn't quite so strong on the Second Amendment. And by doing so, he violated, you know, the law. Yeah. And who knows, may have committed a criminal act. But the plaque reads, "For exemplary service to the people of Liberty County and for the courage to stand for America, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officer Association proudly names Nick Finch its 2014 Sheriff of the Year and is hereby inducted into the CSPOA Hall of Fame, dated this 24th day of January 2014, which was last Friday." Of course, we all stood and clapped. If you're on Facebook, I would ask you to find Sheriff Nick Finch and send him a message. Just tell him you're thankful for what he did, standing up for our Constitution. Yes, sir.
I would applaud anyone in Florida who stands up for the Constitution. I grew up in Florida.
Oh, you did?
And it is one of the most corrupt states in the union.
There aren't too many places left. You know, there's so much corruption even right here in Texas. And I mentioned how many sheriffs from around the country say they look to Texas for leadership, and they ask me, what's going on in Texas? Sheriff Mack even moved to Texas and lived here for a few years, and he was disappointed there wasn't more, you know, outpouring of support from various sheriffs. We had 2 or 3 at this conference from Texas, including the one I will tell you about. So those are 2 courageous sheriffs among many. There was another one there. He's a police chief actually from New Mexico. He was traveling to the conference with a sheriff from the county just south of New Mexico, and they were harassed by the TSA at the Albuquerque airport. And just a really disgusting display of arrogance. And even after they knew who they were, they weren't carrying their weapons or anything, weren't trying to do anything but go through security like we would. And this one TSA supervisor got in his face and was very heated. And the Albuquerque airport police officers who knew these guys had to intervene, actually separate the TSA supervisor and this. This is a peace officer of the state in which they're standing. And this arrogant fill in the blank wants to. And then after they got to the gate, they were sitting there, and some guy from the TSA comes up with a camera and starts taking their picture and writing notes, in their face, trying to intimidate them. It's just ridiculous. And so that might be another case that there's more to it that I can't tell you. It's kind of a developing situation, but if you could go to CSPOA.org and join or fill out the form, and if anybody wants to write a check for the membership tonight, I'm going to mail all those in. I've been collecting those. Or if you want to go online and do it. I just want you to know this is the organization that will go to bat for those county sheriffs and peace officers who are willing to stand up. Some of you may have recalled the deputy sheriff in New York State last year who intervened on behalf of the 2 young people. There's a young man and woman who were passing out flyers to the traveling public, educating them of their rights when you go through screening at the TSA. And this guy who was an airport administrator tried to throw him out. Did any of you see that video? Yeah. Sheriff deputy intervened. He was our 2013 Deputy Sheriff of the Year. And I met him at St. Charles, Missouri, and consider him a personal friend now. And this organization, by highlighting these efforts, plants a seed in the mind of a peace officer that I can do the right thing. I might even be arrested, like Sheriff Finch was. I mean, if you're the sheriff of your county and you can be arrested, what's to think a patrol officer, couldn't be arrested, and very well could come to that. As you said, you could be arrested for standing on an overpass or, exercising your First Amendment right. So you have to be willing to do what's right.
What was Sheriff Finch charged with when he was arrested?
I believe it was, I don't know the Florida statute, but it was basically
Obstruction,
what did I say earlier? No,
It was interference with some kind of.
official misconduct, I guess, is the blanket term. Yeah, official misconduct is what they claim, but the elements of the offense were, that's why people were laughing in the courtroom, because they couldn't prove that. Just to finish up, we then had an excellent presentation from Chris Ann Hall. And how many of you are familiar with her?
She's coming to Dallas.
Yes, on February 10th. Okay, this is a big one because part of our ongoing educational effort is to daily read our Constitution and carry these books with us and know them so you can quote them from memory. It's pretty disarming when a peace officer is violating your constitutional rights, perhaps through ignorance, because they went to one of those police academies that doesn't really teach the Constitution. We're going to try to fix that. But when you can read them from memory, the statute or Constitution, and just ask questions. If you ask questions, you're not really as threatening. You just ask, what authority do you have? You can quote the law to them. That's pretty disarming. Oh, I better go get a supervisor. I don't know. But it may just make them stop and think. It would me. Because they could end up in a federal court having violated your constitutional rights. It's a pretty serious matter. But Chris Ann Hall gave an awesome presentation, as she always does. This one was catered to ongoing efforts of the CSPOA to draft a document, a proclamation, if you will, that we put the finishing touches on. And I can't release that to you. This is the first draft, but it was a declaration of rights by United Sheriffs and Peace Officers of America. It's basically a statement of the things that we as members of the CSPOA and that we would hope that all peace officers across America would sign on to. Things like the following abuses will no longer be allowed or tolerated. And these aren't the exact words because it was modified, but just so you'll know the topics that were covered. Registration of personal firearms or systematized confiscation of firearms under any circumstances. Random audits or searches of a citizen's personal affairs or finances without probable cause and due process. Random inspection of farms, ranches, personal businesses without probable cause or duly signed warrants as required by the Fourth Amendment. Detainment and search of citizens without probable cause or the informed consent of the citizen. Arrests or incarcerations without charges and complete due process, including public and speedy jury trials. As I read these, you're probably thinking of Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and so forth. Arrests or, domestic utilization of our nation's military against American citizens. And someone was talking about in the most recent NDAA, there was something about posse comitatus in relation to the DHS, and if these vehicles that are out desensitizing us, that they are our police, are the first indication of that, or one of many. Sheriff's deputies being under control of whatever that means. I don't know how your sheriff's deputies come under control of DHS. That will never happen when I'm sheriff. The feds know, for example, in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's county, Maricopa County, and I just visited him a couple of months ago in Phoenix, and they have joint task force. For example, I went out with the unit that deals with human smuggling, and there's federal agents and Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies, but everybody there knows clearly who's in charge, and it's the deputies, not the other way around. Yes, sir.
What about the issue of foreign troops that are in the United States?
Right, and this document those issues came up, and then in the final draft, and if you're of the opinion that if you want to express an opinion about inclusion of a particular item in that, I would encourage you to email Sheriff Mack. Just go to the CSPOA website. There's an informational section where you can submit that, or send it to my email address, which is kirk@planetkirk.com. It's KIRK@PLANETKIRK.com, and I'll forward it to him. That's excellent. So I just wanted you to know this is the type of effort. So I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. These are the kind of efforts that your support, your donations will help to continue. Because Sheriff Mack was been carrying a lot of this on his back. He founded the organization, but he'll be the first to tell you this is not about Sheriff Mack. He was so pleased at this conference. For the first time, he saw that even if he went away, that the organization would really continue on. And that was a big part of the discussion, is where do we want it to go from here? And this was not a big public convention like some of the others have been. This is more of a workshop. But we saw some real leaders step forward. One of the people, let me just finish up about Chris Ann Hall. She has a radio show every day. And, I would encourage you to read this, but just as we're having a discussion and it helps you cement in your mind what the key issues are, through debate, what do they say about steel sharpening steel? It's okay. Sometimes we get a little passionate and raise our voices and whatnot, but it's all meant to increase our understanding. And I really value that. That's why I come to this group. Well, she does that daily on Monday through Friday. You can find it at soundcloud.com/Chris Ann Hall. Soundcloud.com is a site that archives all kinds of audio radio shows. So soundcloud.com/Chris Ann Hall. And she travels constantly. She was in Las Vegas on Friday. She flew to St. Louis to teach a group up there. And then today she flew back to Tucson, and she's actually teaching at the University of Arizona tomorrow. And she is getting massive hits on the internet. More, I won't say that. There's some statistics out there about who is the most listened to, and she's passed somebody very recently that is very well known. So, and to be able to actually teach at the University of Arizona is a hopeful sign. Because we know our universities have been invaded by the wrong elements over the last few decades. On Sundays, her show is on the Genesis Communications Network. I know there's some other radio talk show people that, isn't the Power Hour on there? So GCNlive.com, and you can access all kinds of great shows on there. But if you do /programs and Chris Ann Hall, I'm sorry, just Chris Ann for that one. So it's GCNlive.com /programs/Chris Ann. You can listen to her Sunday shows. So she does a radio show but every day except Saturdays. And she has a husband and a small son, so she's really sacrificing a lot of her time. She was a Russian linguist in the Army, speaks Russian, which is pretty cool because in college I was an exchange student in the Soviet Union. So I've actually lived in a communist country. And this was in 1989. And I don't speak much Russian, but I speak enough that I thought that was really cool when I learned she's a Russian linguist. And she's a constitutional lawyer. She was a prosecutor in Florida, not far from where Sheriff Finch lives. And she's just a fireball. I mean, she knows her stuff. She's coming to Texas, and I want all of you to come. If we have to carpool, she's so awesome. February 10th, which is a Monday, it's going to be hosted by the Northeast Tarrant Tea Party. And what's her name? Julie McCarty?
Yeah.
Isn't that her name? The host?
She's also coming to the John Birch Study lunch. It's the second Tuesday.
Is that on the same day?
Second Tuesday, so the next.
The next day, probably the 11th?
So, yeah, I'll have to check. I'll check the dates and I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, you gotta see her and listen to her. I believe, it's gonna be in the evening. If you go to netarrantteaparty.com, it stands for Northeast Tarrant Tea Party. So go to, the website is netarrantteaparty.com. And the topic will be on the Constitution and mixing politics and religion, so it won't be controversial at all. I love Chris Ann. She's the best.
She also, look her up on Facebook. She puts something out daily.
Yeah. She was actually, I think she was fired by the DA in her county because she was out teaching the Constitution to groups on her own time. And he just couldn't have her do that. And I think he lost in the next election cycle, so good. See, we do have term limits. It's called the ballot box, right? Yes, sir.
Well, that brings up a good question of who has had the ear of law enforcement over the last few decades at least, maybe even going back further than that. We have such things as the MIAC report coming out and certain conferences or seminars held by the Southern.
Tell us what that means, just for those who don't know.
I was hoping you would,
Oh.
because I know it comes from Missouri, but
Okay.
but anyway, as far as the question I'm asking is, now we have been finding out, identified who are the terrorists. The terrorists could be right-wing extremists, they could be returning veterans.
Sure.
They could be Christians.
Well, Janet DiPolitano cleared that up for us, didn't she?
I'm sure she did.
Yeah.
Now we have the new report.
I think I'm in every category.
The Atlantic Institute now has identified that the new threat to the, what did he say, the New World Order? The new threat is empowered individuals. Now, my question to you is, how do you get the ear of law enforcement? How do we turn this 180 degrees and refute this information?
When you're out, walking and you see a police officer, sheriff's deputy, constable, police officer, I don't know about those DHS people. I don't know what they are, but the ones who've taken the oath and have had that training to, yeah, and you mentioned Oath Keepers too, and I'm a member of Oath Keepers. It's oathkeepers.org, right?
Yes.
By the way, Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers, the founder, is a big participant. He wasn't at this conference, but he was at St. Charles, Missouri last May or June when we had that conference. And the Oath Keeper volunteers from whatever city we're having the conference in always come to help. But, you know, walk up and talk to those officers. You know, my friend who's been in law enforcement here in Dallas for many, many years, we were talking about an incident where a car had crashed and was on fire, and there was one police officer out there, and I rolled up and simply walked up and said, "Can I be of some help?" He didn't know who I was, and he was pretty much just blew me off and was pretty rude. You know, I didn't let it really get to me. Do you know who I am? No, it wasn't like that, but, you know, thought he might need some help. But my friend said, you know, that's just a shame, because when he joined the Dallas Police Department, it wasn't that way. He said he's noticed that a lot of and this wasn't really a young officer, but they get so, you know, sometimes they get jaded and they don't, my friend says he would always accept help if it was within reason and he needed it. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think by being friendly and walking up and offering an officer a pocket Constitution, and not in an arrogant way like, you never learned this in the Constitution in the police academy, so you need to learn it now, and giving them one of these, and I'd encourage you to order these in bulk from CSPOA. It'll help the organization. The only source of funds of the CSPOA is through the sale of the various materials, and get a copy of the DVD. Watch the they have a DVD set for every conference going back to the first one. Amazing speakers. Yes, sir.
Just briefly, my experience has been, I've tried to hand police information of different sorts, whether it be an audio cassette tape, a CD, a DVD, or a Constitution.
Right.
And I've been met with, well, we're not allowed to accept this.
Well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, you know, an officer can go to a restaurant that gives a discount or even free food, which they're not supposed to do, and accept that. But, you know, that's just a closed-minded person.
Jimmy has.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Jimmy had.
Just a second.
What percentage, or how many more police officers are there than sheriff's officers?
Dallas Police Department they'll say it's up around 4,000. It's significantly less than that. I'd say over 3,000. Sheriff's Department has something like, I want to say 200 and some 300 sworn deputies.
Okay, now then, the police officers are where we're seeing all these terrible atrocities. If you're familiar with what happened in Orange County last week, and we never see those kinds of heinous activities in the sheriff's department. We see them quite regularly. They are,
Yeah.
but not to the extent.
Well, the sheriff is directly elected by the people. And so you have a police chief who's appointed. You have to ask yourself, how do they get their job? City manager is their boss, and that person's not elected. We never have an election for a police chief or a city manager. So they're at least 2 or maybe 3 levels removed from we the people. But a sheriff, the boss of the sheriff is who? We the people. That's why they are the chief law enforcement officer.
But is the sheriff higher on the pecking order than the police department?
Oh, the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in the
Not
county.
even the president of the United States can tell the local sheriff.
That's right. And if anyone comes into your county and is violating your rights, they're going to go to Regina's house and, institute a search without a warrant. The sheriff is oath bound to stop it. And that's why, whether it's a case of an illegal search or taking someone's children, as I heard happened here recently. Does anyone know the update on the Tut family? We were talking about that last week.
No, I don't.
Where,
I thought maybe.
yeah,
What is it about the Tut
TUTT,
family?
the Texas Homeschooling Association has an update on that. So everybody go Google the Tut family, look it up. Well, that was a case where I was told that the deputy constables, and I'm going to find out which constable district it was under, went out to the home and took those children. Now that could be a case. Can you see the parallels where a sheriff, a constitutional sheriff, could go out there and interpose and stop that, just like Sheriff Finch did in Florida to protect his citizens' constitutional Second Amendment rights?
That's right.
Could interpose, and that's what you'll see more of if we start electing
That's
constitutional
right,
sheriffs.
and education.
Yes,
Helen
ma'am.
has.
It doesn't sheriff though, it's county by county, and it can be different in every county, and it can be different in every state, so.
Right, and under, the sheriff is a constitutional office in Texas, and it's not the sheriff's department, it is an office. A department is a subset of something else, there's no such thing. With the sheriff, they are the chief law enforcement officer of the county in which he or she is elected. So,
The Constitution of Texas then?
well, you're taking an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and your state constitution as well. So you're right, there are some states like Delaware. I asked Ted Cruz about this. He said, well, Delaware has a fairly weak state constitution on this matter. We need to read our state constitution and know what are the powers. If a sheriff is removed, which they can be, or resigns, how is that spot filled? Is it elected? I'm told that it could be appointed interim sheriff. So if our sheriff in this county resigned, who would we get? Our county commissioners could appoint maybe the same constable who went out there and took the kids from the Tut family. Great. Now we have an unelected sheriff. So you see the importance of these safeguards.
Very.
The other people in this, I'll just wrap this up, that were in attendance, Larry Pratt, Executive Director of Gun Owners of America. His website is gunowners.org. He's at every conference. I've gotten to know him very well. If you like what the NRA does, you'll really like, this group is just great. They really go the extra mile. Michael Connolly, our local constitutional expert.
Yep.
He lives here in the Dallas area. He's the executive director of the U.S. Justice Foundation. He was there again. Website is usjf.net. Michael Connolly was there. And this goes back to what I opened with. Remember the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, and back in the Second Amendment, it had that M word, militia. So is that something we're making up?
No.
Is this crazy Texas people talking about this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, we're crazy.
Talking
Okay,
about it.
I'll take that. I'll be crazy and die free. Well, the organization called Institute on the Constitution, which is Michael Perutka's group, the one that's offering the Constitution training classes, they produced this video on Sheriff Christopher, the Delaware sheriff I told you about. They make some really great videos. This one is Dr. Edwin Vieira. Oh my gosh, this is like the best video I've ever seen. I got so excited. I was driving back from St. Louis with my friend who's a peace officer here locally. We were actually watching this in the car on the laptop. I think I played it 3 times between St. Louis and here. And it's Dr. Edwin Vieira. I think he has like 3 degrees from Harvard. He is not only an expert on the militia of the several states, and this is the constitutional militia, not these, grassroots, private militias that have no lawful authority whatsoever, but the ones that are actually spoken of in the Constitution, that they're a governmental body. And we should screen this sometime when you can all come watch. But that's his name, Vieira, Dr. Edwin Vieira. And just Google his name, and there's an article called True versus False Militia and Why the Difference Matters. And you need to know that. Because the open carry movement is very visible, and thank God for that. But I don't even like to call it the militia movement, because nothing has ever changed going back to colonial times. It's never been altered. It exists in our Constitution. People who just the agents of misinformation want you to believe that it's something outrageous or fringe, and it's not. So Dr. Edwin Vieira completely dissects this in about an hour and a half presentation. And it's called Constitutional Homeland Security, a call for Americans to revitalize the militia of the several states. Can you read that title again for me?
Sure. First Friday lecture series, Constitutional Homeland Security, a call for Americans to revitalize the militia of the several states.
A call for Americans to, what? Have a revolution? Create something out of thin air? No, revitalize. Can you revitalize something that
Never existed?
Yeah, it's been there all along. And this guy has the degrees to back him up, so not all of our higher education people are misguided. So Dr. Edwin Vieira. Okay, my final name that you must know, and I want her to come up to speak. She is just the best. Pam Elliott is that sheriff I was telling you about in Edwards County, Texas.
Where's Edwards County?
It's west of Kerrville. And she's going to wonder where all this email from Dallas is. She's on Facebook under Edwards County Sheriff. And you can also go to the website edwardscountytexas.us/sheriff/sheriff.htm. Just Google Sheriff Pam Elliott. Now, why is she noteworthy? Well, first of all, she was not only a U.S. Marine, but she's an Army veteran as well. She served many, many years. I think she had multiple tours in Afghanistan. She was a police officer in, I believe it was Glendale, Arizona. And she was handpicked by the sheriff down there, who was going to retire soon. He wanted her to be the sheriff. I think her family lives in Beaumont, but she and her husband wanted to buy some land, and the prices got better as you got out west, and they settled on that area and got to know the sheriff. And her election was 6 days after the end of her deployment. She didn't even have time to campaign. She had met the members of the county. They wanted her to be their sheriff. She never got to meet her opponent, but she won. And this article, it says...
voting?
Say what?
Illegal voting?
No. They were very well informed. She just was serving her country and wasn't able to campaign. Edwards County, Texas Sheriff Pamela Elliott supports the militias, so why won't you? This was posted back in April. She became sheriff just under a year ago. It says, introducing Edwards County, Texas Sheriff Pamela Elliott. This patriot rocks. She's one of the few, the proud, who honor their oaths to the United States Constitution. She is one smart cookie, too. I look at it this way. If Sheriff Pam ever needed to round up a posse for search and rescue or for any other law enforcement purpose, she would have more help than she knew what to do with at practically a moment's notice. Besides having the Edwards County Militia branch of the Texas Militia at her beck and call, she would have the entire Texas State Militia for backup as well. And that's what I call having a backup plan. One smart cookie, wouldn't you say? The whole point of sharing this information here with you is this. The lamestream liberal media has demonized the militia of the several states. And again, those of you who might who watching this and want to poke holes in our truthful balloon here, just read and listen to what Dr. Vieira has to say. And as we said in the Navy, shut your pie hole. You know, I don't want to hear the ignorant. What do we say? If you want freedom and ignorance, they basically can't coexist. There's people that'll watch this and try to say we're the extreme. Well, the militia of the several states is a constitutional concept. We're just reminding our citizenry that we have this tool at our disposal. And it may very well be our last defense, under the leadership of constitutional sheriffs and a constitutional governor, on a state-by-state basis, as Helen pointed out. Okay? The whole point of sharing is that the lamestream liberal media has demonized the militias to the point they make us sound like the outlaws. And that's who that comment was directed to. It's a tactic. When it is the illegal government officials who are the ones outside of the law. We support a constitutional militia as defined by the United States Constitution and as clarified by Dr. Vieira. Contrary to the liberalized propagation of the Second Amendment being about hunting deer or fur or hogs or whatever you like to shoot, it has nothing to do with hunting. Read the Second Amendment. Find out what it really says. Sheriff Pam supports the militia. Again, that's the militia of the several states, the constitutional variety. So why don't you? And you know, she admitted in front of the crowd. By the way, she has volunteered to be on the board of directors of the CSPOA. And I'm so thrilled because she's female, she's young, we need, you know, all that youthful energy. And it just offered me a lot of hope to say, you know, things aren't good in Dallas County, but we do have a sheriff in Texas. And there are others, we just need to find them. So that's pretty much it. I hope you got a pretty good view of what happened in Las Vegas. And Al,
what was the website for her again?
Her best place to find her is on Facebook. And I do have her website, but on Facebook, just put in Edwards County Sheriff, and it'll come up on
Probably
Facebook.
if you search it, you'll find her.
Yeah, just Google.
Just search it, because, and we're glad we had you. I'm sorry it got a little late for everybody.
Yeah,
It's
my voice
amazing
held
how
out.
much longer. No, you did fantastic. No,
There was
we
just too much.
appreciate it.
I'll stick around for other questions, and please pick up a copy of this. They're $1 a piece. And if you have the membership form as well. And can I just leave this here and
Totally,
tidy
leave
up
it.
later?
Answer any questions.